Okay, so it's Tuesday, and I have started calling this Taco Tuesday for totalitarian, authoritarian Christian organizations. That is my new name for these groups that I've previously called non denominational, high demand religious organizations. That is just too long of a name, so we're going to start calling these tacos. And this is Taco Tuesday, drinking the Kool-Aid edition. Actually, I am drinking sugar-free green tea and manzana apples. Okay, if you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidgemeier. I used to write about these subjects and more at No Longer Quivering for Pathos for over 10 years. And I'm working on my first to be released book with Strange Fire about my time in the Quiverful organization. I'll let you know when it's available for download. Okay, these are just my opinions. Don't bully anybody I talk about. Don't even be rude or nasty in the comments. Rock and roll churches. No, because they've never been called rock and roll churches. That is a fiction that a certain troll loves to push. But here's the thing, they do this weird rock and roll stuff, and I love it. I hate to say it, I still like Christian music. There's still times when I have to put praise and worship on and listen, even though my thoughts are very different these days on some of this, but not all of it. And this is one thing that gets me about these tacos. They have this corrosive control of your brain. That's what I mean by drinking the Kool-Aid. If they can control your mouth, they can control your thoughts. And some of their behaviors when they're trying to do this is just ridiculous. In the last 6 weeks or so, since Josh Butler's book, Beautiful Union, has been pushed by the Gospel Coalition and others, myself and many of my friends, and I'm going to call them colleagues and fellow evangelicals, who keep telling the Gospel Coalition that relating a man's spunk to salvation is a problematic thing. It's not biblical. It's just plain old weird. And for me, I've gone in some weird ways with it. It makes me think weird things like all the great worship songs that talk about salvation. Salvation spring up from the ground, Lord, rend the heavens and come down. No, not if that's what salvation is. So they're trying to say that, but here's where I mean about drinking the Kool-Aid. Every single day, there has been a new, more insulting group of names that the Gospel Coalition and the patriarchal guys call us for saying, hey, maybe semen is not salvation and a woman's parts are not hospitality. It's a gross way to think about Christianity. We're getting called things like prude. That was right after Wicked Feminist and so many others. And the one word they keep screaming is mob. Mob is a way to dehumanize people. And if you can figure them in a huge mob, it means you don't have to take anything they're saying seriously. It means you can take actions like have the police control them, beat on them, various things like that. And then it leads all the way to really bad things. Like we're talking, uh, that is going to disappoint the mythical succubuses. Yeah, it is. And it's going to create some weird confusion if you're thinking about worship songs. It's like, rend the heavens and come down. No. There's not a umbrella big enough for that. a umbrella big enough for that. So they're doing all this and they're categorizing us as a mob so that they can dehumanize us and belittle us. And that is the first steps to the kind of evil that leads to things like death camps. It's really the first step. So when I see somebody doing this to a whole group of people, instead of directly addressing the criticism that the person has. I know they're unsafe at any speed. I don't want to be around that person. I don't even want to have conversations with them at that point because there's nothing you can say that is going to be sensical that they will put any kind of backing on. They're just going to keep marginalizing you and pushing your ass into the corner indefinitely. So the time they went there with that, I was kind of like, no. But this is kind of what happens in these taco type places. You have these guys that will belittle and minimize anybody who's not lining up with what they're saying. I'm finished with coffee. Yeah. If they're doing that all the time, you have to ask yourself why. Are they afraid of what you're saying? Are they afraid of the power of what you're saying? And the answer with that would be yes. But this is super common in these tacos. Like I said, I think the best illustration I had of that was during Hurricane Katrina, or right at the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I was still nominally in my old Quiverful church when Katrina happened. And everybody there knew I was from South Louisiana. So in the aftermath of Katrina, I mean the aftermath of mere days, people would ask me about my thoughts on New Orleans and Katrina. And then they would tell me their thoughts. And it was an eye-opening experience. It was one of those things that I categorize in my book as one of those points where the thread was being pulled out of the tapestry because everybody was doing the Kool-Aid drinking to the point where they were having thoughts about how the people of New Orleans earned this, that this that happened to them was earned. And it most certainly was not. I can tell you, my husband worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for some years down at the foot of Britannia Street. Every year they would go to Congress and say, hey, huge hurricane potential. This needs to happen. This needs to happen. We need to strengthen these levees. We need to do this. We need to put that in place. And every year, Congress just stuck this part of their body up some other part of their body and just whittled away and got away from that, refused to authorize any funds. So there were a lot of things setting the scene for Katrina, but to hear all of my fellow church members say it was because of the sin of the people in New Orleans as to why New Orleans got almost wiped off the map. And it did get almost wiped off the map. I was pretty furious with all of them because of that. Every time we would have that conversation, I would hear that. And I had just been in South Louisiana, I mean, just days before Katrina hit. And when I would tell people horror stories, it's like, do you know that they won't pay to reinforce the levees or redo the wetlands so that takes the brunt of these hurricanes? Whenever I would tell somebody that, they would say, sin, 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 sin. Most of the problem in New Orleans is below sea level and sinking, and the erosion of buffer lands, plus the pumping that eliminated the natural replenishment of the Mississippi River Delta. Java man, I'm not disputing that. That's actually very true. But every time the Army Corps of Engineers tried to get funding for those things to fix them, Congress was like, nope. However, they did send 100,000 body bags to New Orleans very early on. Those had been stored for a long time. Tells you where their thinking is. My husband worked in the cost to benefits ratio area and got to see very few of the actual projects he worked on ever come to fruition, which is pretty sad. And it's not all of New Orleans is below sea level. The part of New Orleans where I had family members living was not. That is above sea level because the Cajuns built above sea level right up against the Mississippi. Michael Brown was wondering why they needed that. Well, the thing with the ice is it's crucial down there during hurricanes. Once the electricity goes off, to be able to have a source of fresh ice, because you're going to have some things you're going to have to put in an ice chest to keep cool enough, like maybe milk or cheese or meat, something like that. So ice is a crucial component down there. But everyone in my old church was kind of like, we should not be bailing those people out because they purposely built below sea level and nobody should pay for that. That should be on those people, those people. And that's another dehumanizing statement that is really common in taco churches. He was informed the ice was to keep the bodies frozen. Ugh. That could be too, because certainly a lot of people died during Katrina, and it was pretty horrific. I was down there a couple of months after it happened and was just jaw dropped. They were starting to dig out at that point. It was not uncommon to see these beautiful grand old boulevards where the trash from the houses was stacked 50 feet high in the boulevard in the middle of the land between the roads. There were no working stoplights that we found. There was a whole lot of four-way stops. That became the law of the land, four-way stop. And it was pathetic. I have never seen such a bad response from the federal government. In the meanwhile, they're over responding to other things. So it is pretty crazy. And it's crazy they didn't bring in refrigerated trucks for the corpses. They should more than they did. So this horrible tragedy, and they're blaming it actually on the people who live there. And I definitely was not down for hearing that because my aunt lived, oh heck, like 2 or 3 blocks from where the 13th Street Canal gave, the levee gave. And when you're seeing family members that have water up past their second floors, it is just, I can't even begin to describe to you the pain that is watching people you know and love struggle with this stuff. So it was pretty traumatic for me, and they were making it worse. Heck of a job, Brownie. Yeah, heck of a job. And that was kind of like, that's not even the first time that Louisiana seriously bobbled, and the federal government seriously bobbled hurricane relief. The earliest one that I read about was Isle Denier, Lost Island. Back in the 1850s, a hurricane came through and wiped all the millionaires' cottages off that beach and killed just oodles of people. The ones that didn't, and the ones that who survived, were robbed by the pirates who came through there. So whenever you have people that are thinking in lockstep that are going to take any kind of thing that happens and they're going to blame it on sin instead of actually dealing with what the problem is, the problem being that there was no restorative anything done, even though it was recommended. So instead of saying human error or maybe whatever, pirates of the Caribbean, not quite Java Man, the pirates that inhabited the zillions of little small islands in Louisiana in the 1800s were not so friendly or as family fun as the pirates of the Caribbean. That's another reason why I couldn't watch those movies. Knowing what the reality of pirates were back in those days and what they did to the people on land, it was never going to make me happy with pirates. So that's my ramble about that. But I saw that again and again and again and again in my old church. I saw that for Y2K when everybody was rushing around like lunatics buying whole house generators, buying case after case of toilet paper and canned foods and just all sorts of things that I'm like, it's not likely to happen that all the computers in the world are going to think that it's, 1900s again. And you're right, Disney is not known for historical accuracy. They Disneyfy everything, they sugarcoat it, which is another reason why a lot of people in the evangelical world love Disney. Because they don't have to think hard. They don't have to question what it is. They just know they're going and they're going to be entertained. And there won't be any nasty man parts, splooge, any of that. Anything that's not their worldview is going to be promoted. Except lately now, Disney has been giving um, the LGBTQ crowd, um, not special privileges, but they've been treating them like they treat everybody else, which I think is a great idea. They probably love songs of the South. I'm sure they do. That movie, oh my word, I saw it when I was like 11 or 12. And I remember sitting in the theater and watching that and thinking, oh no, this is not very accurate and not good. I grew up where we actually had servants at various times. I remember for a long time we had a housekeeper, and my dad would hire people to do the yard and do various things, and they were all African American. And I grew up with more love and care from the African Americans my father hired than I did from a lot of the people in my own family. So as a child, I quickly came to the realization that while the things my father said about African Americans were absolutely hogwash, that they were no different than us. They had the same everything. So seeing that movie was just off putting for me as a child, even. Years later, when I saw The Help with a close girlfriend of mine who's still in a taco type church, we both laughed until we cried. And I just told her, I had to tell her that was my childhood. A lot of that movie rings very true. Along with his testimony to the Congressional Committee for Un-American Activities. Oh, yep, yep, yep. So there's that. We went through a kind of a crazy situation in the US with the Congressional Committee for the Un-American Activities. And the writers, so many writers were blacklisted during that. And it's kind of ironic. I'm talking about this today, the first day of the writer's strike for television and movies. We're in a time of flux in that industry and all over because of the streaming services, and the writers, they want to be paid. They want to be paid fairly in what they're worth. And so I stand with them in this thing. I think that they deserve to be compensated for their work, to have the same protections as many other American employees are eligible. Didn't Reagan give testimony to that committee as well? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Reagan threw some people under the bus during that. I'm something of a history geek. I remember reading about that and thinking, why would you even do this? This is not a good idea. It's not like there were Reds under every bed. Well, I'm really strayed a long way from what I was going to talk about, except that I haven't in some ways because that was a witch hunt back during the time when they were trying to homogenize all of America, which clearly did not happen. And that leads me back to people in the church in these taco type things that they want to see us return to the 1950s, but the 1950s of their imagination. I am reminded of that every time I go eat barbecue at Red Hot and Blue when I'm in the States, because one of the signs in Red Hot and Blue says something like, "You are now entering the South of your imagination." And I thought about that stupid sign a whole lot. The South of your imagination. So for fundamentalists and for evangelicals in particular and taco churches, entering the 1950s of their imagination is where they want to go. And it's not really a very true view of what the 1950s were like. Now, I can't speak to that because I'm old, but I'm not that old. Some people think that it's good. I don't. There are so many times in taco that these people will use this kind of wishful thinking and kind of thought suppression to keep you from thinking. The goal is to keep you from thinking, because if you think for yourself, you might come to different conclusions than what they're telling you to think. And I know why people join these things, because they don't want to have to think. They want to have the tribal experience where everybody and their brother all thinks and does the same thing, and there is no variance. So you don't have to think. Some people don't want to have to think. Unfortunately, I can't turn my brain off, so that never made it a comfortable place for me to be, even when I was drinking the damn Kool-Aid. And if you add the whole complementarianism into it, you have a whole different level of not thinking. That one boils down to two different things: women submitting with a smile in all ways, and men as petty tin-plated dictators. So is really what we're talking about today. And so many times when I was in my old church, I observed this, and in other churches, I observed this. So many times I had questions about things. The brain accounts for 2% of the body weight, but 20% of the energy usage. Thinking is hard. Yes, it is hard. And it leads you to places you don't necessarily want to be, is the problem with thinking. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of people don't want to even do that. I'm looking around for my my iPad. I every day do like brain power exercises, video games on my iPad, because I don't want to lose any more brain than I already have lost, that I lose sometimes from the hideous amounts of prescriptions I'm on that do affect your mind some. But in fundamentalism, and evangelicalism, there's none of that. There's no thinking, there's no creative thinking. You're not allowed to be creative except for in a few narrow ways that they define. That was always a problem for me. Always, always, always. So many times I would go up to the pastor after the sermon and say, "Did you really mean X, Y, or Z?" And there were times that said, "No, no, I didn't mean that. You're interpreting wrong." There are other times that said, "Well, yes, sort of." And a few times where I said, "Yes, absolutely, that's what I'm talking about." So many times in Bible study, women's group, women's retreats, so many different activities, I never always said what was on my mind, because to do that would earn you a frailing from some leader. The biggest example of that is when we were going through Neil T. Anderson's The Bondage Breakers, the workbook. I've showed it to you before. It's purple and yellow on the outside. They had a whole list of things they considered sin that you had to repent from. And one of the biggest ones for me was yoga. And I questioned that. I stood up and said, why must I repent from this? Because I don't believe it's a sin. And this is why I don't believe it's a sin. Well, buddy, I got smacked down hard by someone who wasn't even in church leadership, who told me, yes, it was a sin because of the chanting of demons' names. And I'm sitting back down, clutching my little book, chastised for actually speaking out, thinking, all those times, all those years I did Lilius yoga and you with Lilius Folus, I don't ever remember chanting a demon's name. I don't remember doing any of that. And it really shut me down hard for something that wasn't even a thing. But that's the problem with that. That is the problem with a lot of these places. They don't want to discuss things. They just want to tell you, hey, we're supporting Israel, but not the reasons why. Hey, we're having 10,000 children, but not the reasons why. Hey, we're doing this, without having a reasoning for it. Not at all, which still to this day kind of blows my mind. Most of the chanting of demons' names occurs during rock and roll and heavy metal uh, concerts. Hey, Moonchild Pink. Um, the demon names. And that was funny because we had a lot of people that were very against certain types of rock and roll, certain types of songs, certain types of bands. And it was kind of funny because the way our worship team ran was we would always do one hymn and we would do a whole pile of modern rock and roll worship songs. And there were some people in the audience who were upset and said we should be doing all hymns, no variation. They said, rock and roll church is demonic. If it's got a syncopated rhythm, you're gonna burn, to quote Audio Adrenaline's The Houseplant song, which talks about this very thing. Once you have those Kool-Aid-ish thoughts about these songs, it becomes a problem. So we were always very critical. People were always very critical of that. And it used to irk me being on worship team because so many times you would get off the platform on a natural high from having performed for that hour or whatever. And people would rush up to you to tell you, you shouldn't do that song. Or I saw you moving your hips while you were singing. It's sinful. Just all these different thoughts. Party people. Hey, Prairie. I see you that link. I don't know if you got it or not for Lori Alexander banned me. So all of that, yeah, is going on with a lot of these places. And I don't get it. Again, I just don't get it. If the pastor wants to do a certain kind of music, well, by golly, in most churches, that's a certain kind of music that you are gonna do. I sent it to you through your messenger, so you may not have checked it yet. So when you're ready to, because that's where all that weird Lori Alexander stuff is. Oh, did you see? Lori Alexander is getting pushback right now from a bunch of higher up on the food chain Christian influencers, Christian cultural enforcers. They're giving her a lot of pushback about everything. One of the ones that really shocked me was Elizabeth Prata. She has been all over Lori right the last couple of days. And I'm here for watching that because Lori says so many damaging, horrible things. Everything from you shouldn't work ever. And that doesn't take into account the bad things that happen, like your husband losing his job, or becoming a single mother suddenly when your husband dies. She just does not believe if you're a woman, you're supposed to step out of the house. And it was kind of funny because the other day she was ranting about women using their smartphones and women driving away because both of those things supposedly take you away from the house. And then less than 24 hours later, she posted this big video she did while she was driving down the road in her car using her smartphone to record the video. And I just was looking at that and just laughing, going, hypocrite much? Hypocrite? Because this is the very thing she was getting onto other women for, and she's doing it. So I am completely here for them giving her a hard time because it should have happened years ago. She has been getting worse and worse lately with her proclamations for what women are supposed to do and not supposed to do. Proverbs 31 woman worked very hard. Prairie, up until the Victorian time, most women did. You might not work, taking a job in an office or something, but at the very least, you helped your father or your husband with his family business, whether it was a store or a farm. You helped out. You had to. It was not even an option. You had to do those things in order to make enough money for the family. And she is trying to say that that Proverbs 31 woman did not work outside the home, when the whole thing says she did. And she had, not only did she work outside the home, she had staff. She had staff to do all the crap that Lori Alexander is demanding you do, or you are some kind of bad woman and mother. So it's funny sometimes when you see these guys and these gals, especially, completely misinterpret scriptures in such weird ways. You look at this stuff and you're like, what kind of Kool-Aid are they drinking? I surely don't want whatever it is, because I'm certainly not wanting that at all. So many times that's what they're doing. I would love to be a fly on the wall at their house right now, her and Ken, because I know for a fact from my own interactions with Lori that she goes to Ken and complains about these women that are giving her a hard time. And Ken jumps in to save the day. So I'm curious. I'm sitting back watching this going, oh, yeah. The Proverbs 31 woman had a Proverbs 31 husband, man of standing, important. Yes, exactly. It wasn't like he was working down in Billy Bob's garage for minimum wage. He was a man of substance, and she was a woman of substance. Even though she could have been way different, she was a woman of bravery and valor in my eyes. So the thing with Lori Alexander recently is her views have just gotten more and more radical, and every time that happens, I start to question what's going on with her brain tumor. I'm not sure why people are even taking her seriously at this point, because everything she says is just not, quote, biblical at all. It's just her interpretation of the Bible. And it's funny because she doesn't think women should teach, and here she is trying to teach the Bible. She doesn't think women should teach, and only women who are allowed to teach or older women are supposed to teach younger women. It does say that in the Bible, but I don't think it means what she thinks it means. It's something entirely different. So, Lori, God bless her. I hope she finds whatever happiness has been lacking in her life. And I hope it happens soon, because I can't imagine living your life in such a state of misery and anger. All I can say is bless her heart, and I genuinely mean it. Yes, Prairie, the same. The same. And I genuinely mean it. I don't hold anything against her as far as like hoping something bad happens to her. That's just not my speed. There are very few people that I can look at and say, hey, I hope something really bad happens to you. This last couple of days have been really down for me. I've been kind of down the dumps because I'm still dealing with the rolling confloption that is my mother, and her in Louisiana needing some help, needing to go into a care home and not being able to accomplish that. I have my Aunt Heap still calling me up, agitating me and saying various things. And it's just really been hard because of that. And I don't have a lot of emotional energy left for the Lori Alexanders or the troll, or even any of the alliances that are going back and forth right now on Twitter and YouTube. And I'm just looking at that going, no. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go. I'm going to go lay down. It's been one of those days already, and I haven't even been awake that long. Love you guys. Thank you for watching. If you could do the YouTube things on your way out of the door, that would be awesome.